Three defendants spoke and apologized for the roles they played in the murder of Alishah Pointer. Now, these three are the ones that took the plea deals. They cooperated with the investigation and also testified as needed, all of which the judge took into consideration when handing down their sentences.
Tonight's story begins in a dark, abandoned house on Savannah Avenue in East Cleveland, where a 21-year-old young woman lay in a basement for days before anyone found her. But what makes this case even more disturbing isn't just how she died, it's why. On November 5th, 2021, her own birthday, Alishah Pointer was driven to that vacant house after being kidnapped, held against her will, and brutally assaulted by a group of people who believed she knew something about a friend's death. What followed was described in court as barbaric. Multiple shooters, 6 defendants, years of legal battles, and a family left shattered, especially her twin sister, who now relives that loss every birthday. How does a rumor turn into a coordinated kidnapping? How do 6 people agree to cross a line that can never be uncrossed? And could this tragedy have been prevented? Tonight, we're breaking down every verified detail, from the moment she was targeted to the investigation, the mistrial, the appeals, and the life sentences handed down in 2026. If you value fact-based storytelling delivered with respect for victims and their families, make sure you subscribe to True Crime Lab Hub. Here, we don't sensationalize. We examine the evidence, the timeline, and the lessons we can learn. Now, let's go back to November 4th, 2021, to the moment this nightmare began. Before courtrooms, indictments, and prison sentences, there was a young woman building a future. Alishah Pointer was 21 years old, raised in East Cleveland, Ohio, surrounded by a close-knit family that described her as compassionate, dependable, and deeply protective of the people she loved. Those who knew her best didn't speak about drama or violence. They spoke about kindness. Her mother, Erica Pointer, told the court that her daughter had a caregiver's heart. That wasn't a figure of speech. Alishah was pursuing work in the nursing field, preparing for a career centered on helping others during their most vulnerable moments. Caring for people wasn't just a job path, it reflected her personality. Friends and relatives shared that she was the type of person who showed up. If someone needed help with their children, she stepped in. If someone was overwhelmed, she offered support. If there was a problem, she tried to solve it. Her older sister described her as someone who would give the shirt off her back. And then there was her twin. Aliyah Pointer wasn't just a sibling. She was born alongside Alishah. They shared birthdays, milestones, inside jokes, and a bond that only twins truly understand. In court, Aliyah described her sister as her other half, her best friend, the person who understood her without explanation. Losing that connection created a silence no sentence can fill. Every year, when November 5th arrives, it is no longer just a birthday. It is a reminder. At the time of her death, Alishah did not have children. Her focus appeared to be on family, friendships, and building stability for herself. There is no public record suggesting she had a violent background. Prosecutors later emphasized that she was not engaged in criminal activity connected to the allegations that would ultimately cost her life. Which raises a difficult question. How did someone known for caregiving become the target of a coordinated act of revenge? To understand that, we have to look at the atmosphere surrounding November 2021. Investigators would later reveal that a separate death within the suspect's circle had triggered anger and suspicion. Emotions were running high. Grief had hardened into blame, and instead of turning to law enforcement for answers, certain individuals chose to take matters into their own hands. That decision, to pursue information through force rather than facts, set everything in motion. What began as suspicion would escalate into planning. Planning would turn into action, and action would become irreversible. The next phase of this story unfolds on November 4th, 2021, when a group of individuals drove through East Cleveland with a specific objective in mind. They weren't searching randomly. They were looking for her. So while most people in East Cleveland were finishing work, picking up food, or settling in for the evening, a vehicle carrying 4 individuals was moving with a very different purpose. Inside were Hakeem Ali Shomo, Portria Williams, Destiny Henderson, and Nathaniel Polk Jr. Prosecutors would later describe what happened next as deliberate. The group drove to a residence near Glenmont Road and Superior Road. They weren't there by accident. They were searching for information, specifically for Alishah Pointer. But instead of knocking on doors or asking questions, they escalated immediately. Armed with a firearm, Henderson and Shomo forced 2 women, ages 25 and 21, into their vehicle at gunpoint. These women were not the primary targets. They were leveraged. Imagine that moment. All 2 innocent people suddenly confronted by armed individuals demanding cooperation. Fear becomes immediate. Choices disappear. The objective was clear: find Alishah. Under threat, the victims were made to assist in locating her. Eventually, they led the group to the place where Alishah was staying, and this is where the line was permanently crossed. Rather than confront her openly, the group used deception. According to investigators, they lured her outside. Once she stepped into view, control shifted instantly. She was taken at gunpoint. From that moment forward, her freedom was gone. Now pause here for a second. Think about how quickly a situation can spiral when anger overrides reason. One decision, to grab a weapon instead of a phone, changed 6 lives forever, and it cost one young woman hers. If you're watching right now, tell me in the comments, do you think cases like this are driven more by rage or by group pressure? I read your thoughts, and respectful discussions matter here. After abducting her, the group transported Alishah to the residence of Portria Williams. What happened inside that house would later become some of the most disturbing testimony heard in a Cuyahoga County courtroom. Because this was no longer about locating someone, it had turned into captivity. And as hours passed, more people would arrive, bringing with them an escalation no one could undo. If you're still here with us, it means you're committed to understanding the full truth behind cases like this. And before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to True Crime Lab Hub. We tell these stories with facts, care, and respect for the victims and the families left behind. Now let's go back inside that house. After being taken at gunpoint, Alishah Pointer was brought to Portria Williams's residence. This wasn't a brief stop. She was held there overnight, isolated, surrounded by people who believed she owed them answers. As the hours passed, the situation became more dangerous. Brittany Smith and Anthony Bryant arrived at the house. Not long after, Nathaniel Polk Jr. left. What remained was a smaller group, but one that would soon escalate the violence. Investigators later determined that Alishah was assaulted in an attempt to force information out of her about a separate death. The questioning wasn't calm, it wasn't controlled, it was physical. Court records revealed that she was restrained, beaten, intimidated. The firearm was used not only as a weapon, but as a tool of terror. This was no longer about truth. It was about dominance. And here's what makes this moment especially chilling. Even as the situation spiraled, there were multiple opportunities to stop. Someone could have walked away. Someone could have called for help. Someone could have refused to participate. No one did. At some point, Hakeem Ali Shomo left the residence. But instead of the violence ending, it continued. The remaining individuals made a decision, one that would ensure there was no coming back from what had already been done. They didn't release her. They didn't seek medical help. They didn't contact authorities. Instead, they moved her again. As daylight approached on November 5th, Alishah's birthday, the group forced her into a vehicle. Where they were headed wasn't a hospital, it wasn't a police station, it was somewhere far more isolated. And what happened next would transform this from a kidnapping into a murder case that would haunt East Cleveland for years. While her family should have been preparing birthday messages, while her twin sister should have been celebrating another year of life, a car was pulling up to an abandoned, burned-out house near Savannah Avenue and Manhattan Avenue in East Cleveland. Vacant properties like this often fade into the background of a neighborhood. Boarded windows, damaged interiors, no electricity, no witnesses. The kind of place people pass without looking twice. That isolation is exactly why it was chosen. According to prosecutors, Henderson, Smith, Williams, and Bryant forced Alishah inside the structure. The house offered privacy. No neighbors close enough to intervene. No cameras. No interruption. Inside that abandoned residence, the violence reached its final stage. Investigators later stated that Portria Williams and Anthony Bryant fired multiple shots at Alishah. Destiny Henderson attempted to fire as well, but the weapon did not discharge. In that basement on her birthday, her life was taken. And then, just as chilling, the group left. No one called 911. No one attempted aid. No one reported what had happened. Instead, they returned to Hakeem Ali Shomo's residence. 5 days passed. 5 days before law enforcement located her. On November 9th, the East Cleveland Police Department, working alongside the FBI, discovered her body in the basement of that abandoned house. She was pronounced deceased at the scene. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was a gunshot wound. For her family, those 5 days were likely filled with confusion, fear, and unanswered calls. For investigators, they marked the beginning of a case that would unravel a coordinated act involving 6 individuals. Now pause for a moment and think about this. It wasn't a random encounter. It wasn't a split-second decision. It was transportation from one location to another, each step offering time to reconsider. But reconsideration never came. Instead, what followed was an investigation that exposed not just who pulled the trigger, but who planned, participated, assisted, and remained silent. And in the next phase of this story, the courtroom would become the setting where accountability was demanded, where family members would confront the people responsible, and where sentences would finally be handed down years later. Because justice in this case did not come quickly. But it did come. Once Alishah's body was discovered on November 9th, the case shifted rapidly from missing person to homicide investigation. The East Cleveland Police Department, working alongside the FBI, began reconstructing the timeline. Who was last seen with her? Who had a motive? Who had access to vehicles, weapons, and abandoned properties? It didn't take long for investigators to identify the 6 individuals connected to her final hours. Hakeem Ali Shomo, Anthony Bryant, Brittany Smith, Portria Williams, Destiny Henderson, Nathaniel Polk Jr. All 6 were arrested in the weeks following the discovery. By May 31st, 2022, a grand jury handed down sweeping indictments. The charges reflected the severity of what prosecutors believed had taken place: aggravated murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, conspiracy, and in Shomo's case, having weapons while under disability. This wasn't a simple case with one suspect and one charge. It was layered. Multiple roles, multiple locations, multiple decisions that led to one irreversible outcome. 2 defendants, Destiny Henderson and Nathaniel Polk Jr., opted to plead guilty in December 2022 to involuntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and conspiracy. In March 2023, Portria Williams pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. But the cases involving Shomo, Bryant, and Smith did not resolve so quickly. In March 2023, proceedings were derailed when a procedural court communication was inadvertently sent only to prosecutors. Because it could be interpreted as ex parte communication, the judge declared a mistrial and recused himself. Defense attorneys attempted to have the case dismissed on double jeopardy grounds. That motion was denied. The 8th District Court of Appeals upheld the denial. The Ohio Supreme Court declined to hear the challenge. Years passed between the crime and the final convictions. For the Pointer family, every hearing meant reliving November 2021. Every delay meant prolonged uncertainty. But eventually, verdicts were delivered. On October 31st, 2025, Anthony Bryant was found guilty by a jury on multiple counts, including 2 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, and conspiracy. On November 25, 2025, Hakeem Ali Shomo was found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, kidnapping, felonious assault, conspiracy, and weapons charges. Brittany Smith pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and conspiracy in October 2025. By January 2026, sentencing concluded: Hakeem Ali Shomo, life in prison without parole, plus additional consecutive years. Anthony Bryant, life without parole, plus additional consecutive years. Brittany Smith, life with parole eligibility after more than 4 decades. Portria Williams, Destiny Henderson, and Nathaniel Polk Jr., sentences ranging from decades in prison to life terms. In court, Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael O'Malley described the murder as reaching a level of barbaric violence rarely seen. But the most powerful words did not come from prosecutors. They came from her family. Her mother told the court her daughter was innocent, full of love, and undeserving of what happened. She asked for the strictest punishment. Her twin sister spoke about a loss that cannot be measured, about birthdays that will never feel the same again. And this is where cases like this move beyond legal outcomes. Because prison sentences create accountability, but they do not restore what was taken. We're going to step back and examine the bigger picture. How revenge escalated into coordinated violence, what warning signs were missed, and what communities can learn from this tragedy. Stay with me. The lessons matter. When the courtroom lights dim and the headlines fade, and one question still lingers. How did 6 people convince themselves this was justified? Prosecutors described the motive as revenge. The group believed Alishah had information connected to a friend's death. Whether that belief was accurate or fueled by rumor, what followed was not an attempt to seek truth. It was an attempt to force it. And that distinction matters. Revenge often begins with grief. Grief can turn into anger. Anger, when reinforced inside a group, can evolve into shared outrage. In that environment, extreme decisions start to feel rational. When multiple people participate, responsibility becomes diluted. Each person may feel less individually accountable because others are involved. Psychologists refer to this as diffusion of responsibility, where the presence of a group lowers personal restraint. But here's the reality. At every stage of this case, someone could have stopped it. When the vehicle first pulled up to Glenmont Road, when 2 women were forced inside at gunpoint, when Alishah was lured outside, when she was held overnight, when she was assaulted, when she was placed back into a car, when they arrived at Savannah Avenue. There were multiple off-ramps. None were taken. This wasn't a single impulsive trigger pull. It was a chain of escalating choices. And that's where prevention becomes part of the conversation. Cases like this highlight several warning signs communities cannot afford to ignore. When someone dies under unclear circumstances, emotions run high. Without intervention, whether through community leaders, counseling, or law enforcement, retaliatory thinking can spread quickly. Programs that focus on violence, interruption, and grief mediation have proven effective in some cities. When anger is addressed early, escalation can be prevented. Crimes involving multiple participants often gain momentum because individuals feed off each other's emotions. Teaching young adults about peer pressure, conflict resolution, and legal consequences is critical. It only takes one person in a group to say, "This is going too far," but someone has to say it. The presence of weapons accelerated every stage of this case. Access to firearms transformed intimidation into homicide, strengthening enforcement around illegal possession and encouraging community reporting can reduce lethal outcomes. Vacant homes can become sites for concealed violence. Community redevelopment, neighborhood monitoring, and property management initiatives can reduce opportunities for isolation-based crimes. Prevention isn't abstract, it's practical. And if you've made it this far in the video, it means you care about understanding, not just consuming, true crime. So let me ask you, what do you think is the biggest factor in cases like this: rumor, rage, or group influence? Drop your thoughts below. Respectful dialogue is welcome here. And if you believe in fact-based storytelling that prioritizes victims over sensationalism, subscribe to True Crime Lab Hub. Every story we cover is researched, verified, and told with respect. Before we close, it's important to return to where this story truly belongs. Not with the perpetrators, but with the person whose life was taken. Alishah Pointer was a daughter who was deeply loved, a sister who supported those around her, a twin whose absence leaves a permanent space that cannot be filled, a young woman pursuing work in nursing, a field built on compassion. Her mother described her as special and full of love. Her sisters described her as generous and protective. Her twin described losing her as losing part of herself. Justice, in this case, resulted in life sentences and decades behind bars. Accountability was delivered through the legal system after years of proceedings, appeals, and retrials. But accountability does not equal closure. Each November 5th will now carry two meanings for the Pointer family: a birthday and a remembrance. And perhaps the most important takeaway is this: behind every case file is a human life. Behind every headline is a family. And behind every act of violence is a series of choices that could have gone differently. This was the murder of Alishah Pointer, a case rooted in revenge, carried out by a group, and resolved years later in a courtroom. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this deep dive, share this video to help spread awareness. And until the next case, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and remember the victims first.